All good. Okay, thanks very much. We just had to wait for a bit for the recording to start. So, I'm Paul Quirk. I'm a Solution Productivity Specialist at Microsoft. And today we're talking about Visio services. So basically Visio in the browser, which is kind of cool. So, started late, so I'm going to compress things right down. We'll get you out here a little bit early for TechFest, so you can all head off over there. But thanks for coming along. I kind of thought I'd get about 10 people because it's so late in the day. So, four things which we're going to look at. A little bit about what Visio services is. So primarily what it's going to look to the user. So how does a user interact with this stuff? I'm going to talk a little bit about the server side, but it's a 200 level session. So there's no code, there's no hardcore SharePoint admin stuff. It's pretty high level, mostly from the user perspective. We're going to look at data visualizations, how to hook up data to Visio, how to stick that into SharePoint, and then kind of how to make all these different web parts work together. The final thing is using Visio for SharePoint workflow design and then visualization of those workflows. Okay, so what is it? That's the honeycomb transition. I haven't seen any PowerPoint 2010 transitions so far. One of my personal favorites. Okay, basically, Visio in the browser, rendered with Silverlight. Visio is pretty important tool for marking up things like this supply chain workflow, etc. Pretty good graphical tool. Problem with it is that every single person you want to share that diagram with either has to have a client or has to have the Visio viewer. So the whole fundamental premise of Visio services is that you just need a browser, any kind of browser. So IE, Firefox or Safari. You save it into SharePoint, it gets rendered in that browser. That's the carousel one, it's quite nice too. So other thing is hooking it up to data. So you've always been able to hook SharePoint shapes up to some kind of data source. So it could be an Excel spreadsheet or a SQL Server diagram. But as soon as that data changes, you've got to go into that Visio file, refresh the data, and then send it back out to somebody. So it's a very interactive thing. You've constantly got to go back and update the data, save it, and then pass it on to somebody. So what Visio Services gives you the ability to do is to have SharePoint and the Visio Services service look after that data refresh. So you can tell Visio Services, go and get that data every minute, every hour, every 2 hours. And that's looking after that workload for you. So whenever the user goes to a web page with that Visio diagram on it, it's got the most recent set of data. You don't have to go through and republish it and refresh the data yourself. What I could also do is to have a combination of BI. So we've got some BI data here with a graph, and I've got a diagram over here hooked up to data. So I can start to build these interactive dashboards. And as I click around over here, we can use web part connections to update that data. So I can kind of put all this stuff together to make these pretty rich interactive dashboards. Okay, so first demo is going to be, what does it actually look like? So, am I going up or down? There. Okay, so this is the classic Visio kind of diagram. It's a representation of a supply chain. I can move around in here. I can zoom in, I can zoom out, all that kind of stuff. And that's quite nice. Now, this is kind of similar to the Office web apps, so Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and OneNote. You can render those in a browser. The difference here with Visio Services is that you can't edit this stuff. So all you can do is to refresh the diagram, so get more data, and look at it. You can't do any of that editing things. So other examples we have here would be a network diagram. So we can hook up Visio Services to something like System Center Operations Manager. And that's got all the information about the health of all the servers, all the machines in your network, and then we're using Visio to graphically represent it. So you can see that these two guys here are in a bit of trouble, but everything else is looking okay. If I was to go further, I could click through there and see some more detail. Other things is the classic, how's the sales team going? I can see that everybody's pretty much, is doing okay apart from Neva and Anna on the other side. So again, we're using it to show sales data and people. A slightly different way of looking at this is for UX design. So this is the ribbon for Visio. There's a whole bunch of telemetry data that the product teams collect based on where people click around in the ribbon. So I can draw out a graphical representation of what that ribbon looks like and then hook that telemetry data up to where people are actually clicking. And you can see that if we click across into the design one, what are people clicking the most? So it's a different way of visualizing a piece of data that you otherwise wouldn't think of. And then finally we have the big example, which is performance point server over here. So I've got a nice scorecard. I've got a strategy map and a little table down the bottom here. I come down a bit more. All right, like that. So as I click through my strategy map, the data down the bottom is going to change. As I move further through my, hang on, I've got to get this on full screen here, people. Whoops. As I come further through my dashboards, I'm seeing different data. So I've got a map of the US. I click through here. I see those shops. I'll enable that data. And then as I click through my different shops over here, the data on the side is changing. So it can be really interactive how you assemble these different web parts and bits of data. Got to go. Okay, cool. So around the rendering, it's browser agnostic. So IE, Firefox, and Safari are fully supported. The full fidelity rendering happens through Silverlight. If you don't have Silverlight installed on the machines, it'll degrade down to PNG images, which is not quite as nice an experience as Silverlight, but it's still pretty good. You're still able to view these diagrams. When you publish into SharePoint, it's got to be in the VDW, the visual web drawing format. If it's in the old VSD file format, it's just never going to render. You can save it up and do all your check and check out and versioning and workflow stuff, but it's never going to render in the browser. So basically that VDW format contains all the XAML that's required for Silverlight to render it out in the browser. Also with that XAML format is that when you put it in the browser, bring it back down to Visio, and you round trip all the editing, it's full fidelity between the browser and the client. As I said before, it's read-only on the server. So when you publish it up and Visio then goes back and gets more data, essentially it takes a cached version of that file. So the file over here is getting all the refreshes. If I come to that original file and open that one, I'm not going to get the later data refreshes. I'm going to get the data that was there when I first published it up. So in terms of data sets that we can go out to, so we can go out to SQL from 7.0 onwards, we can go out to SharePoint lists, we can go to Excel services, ODBC, and OLADB data sources. You can craft your own ones. So there are custom data providers that you can build yourself and then publish those up to SharePoint. It will not go out to Access or Access services. It will not go out to straight Excel spreadsheets that aren't in Excel services. So if I've got a Visio diagram and I hook it up to a Excel spreadsheet that's sitting on a file server or on my local machine, when I attempt to save it as a web drawing, it's going to tell me that data set is not supported by Visio services. Choose another one, because basically Visio services doesn't know about it, so I can't do anything with it. In terms of what you need to publish and view, so over here, you need a minimum of Visio Professional and Premium. So there's a few SKU changes with 2010. There's Visio Standard, and then we get into these two guys. So you need either one of those. If you want full fidelity on web pages, any one of those OSs, and these guys here, so IE7 and above, as well as Firefox. This one down here, you move into the PNG support. So if you've got these guys here with 64-bit IE and earlier versions of Firefox and Safari, it'll still work, but it's going to push out those the images as PNG files. Anything below that, you're kind of out of luck. Yeah. It's down here, so there's no fidelity support. It'll still work. No, okay. So this one has 100% fidelity. That's 90. That's kind of, we haven't tested it. It'll probably work because it's just an image. But the zooming in and out isn't quite as nice with those browsers. But yeah, I mean, it's just a browser, to be honest. Okay, and where this sits. So it is part of the enterprise features of SharePoint. So in order to deploy this out to your users, it's an enterprise CAL feature. So it sits on top of SharePoint Server, but it's a application inside the enterprise version of SharePoint. So Visio Professional or Premium plus the enterprise CAL in SharePoint, and you can deliver the stuff out to your users without having to deploy out viewers or the Visio client. Okay, so how does this thing work? So I'm sitting on my PC, I've got a Visio diagram, I hook it up to a data source, I connect all the stuff up, I upload that or I publish that Visio diagram into SharePoint as a VDW, and it sits inside Visio Services. So that's the authoring. On the consumer side of things, I'm browsing through SharePoint and I hit a web part page or I hit a document library with a Visio file in it. Now Visio Services goes back and it refreshes that data, brings the data back, renders up my Visio file in the browser for me, and sends it all back down to the client. So kind of Visio Services is there doing all of that mediation and chatting away with your data source to render stuff out, and then it gives it back to you. So in terms of the performance options, there are some throttling things which you can do. The first one is the maximum file size. So for the Visio web drawing, the maximum file size is 50 megabytes that it's going to allow you to load up. You can put bigger ones up, but they can't be web drawing files. The minimum cache age is kind of how long am I going to keep this refreshed diagram in the cache. So it's kind of how long, is it a minute, is it 2 minutes? If I'm inside that, if a user comes in inside that cache age, it's going to get the older version, but if they come in outside it, it's going to go back and refresh the data. So that can help you put upper bounds and lower bounds on how much work Visio Services is doing. And the maximum cache age is kind of the same as that, but on the other side, keeping a lower bound. The maximum recalculation duration is kind of like a timeout. So how long is Visio Services going to sit there trying to drag data back from the database? The default is a minute. You can go up to, I think it's about 5 minutes, but basically what's happening there is Visio Services is consuming server resource and memory and CPU trying to talk to it, so you don't want that too long. You want to bring that down pretty quick and make sure that when you create these diagrams, it's not going out and chewing up server resources. On the security side of things, so on Paul, I have created a data connection to a SQL Server database sitting over here, and I've published this into Visio. But when Tom comes along and hits that diagram, then Tom's probably not going to pass his credentials the whole way through to that database. You probably want to do some kind of single sign-on. So you can set up that source database as an application inside SharePoint and use the secure it's the single sign-on service account thing. So basically, Tom hits it. There's a mapping between Tom and what credentials am I going to use to hit that database, and that's the secure store service that's doing that work for you. So as opposed to having to try to pass these accounts all the way through. Okay. So in terms of the visualization, so once I've got data on my shape, so I've got my flowchart inside Visio, and I want to do some data visualizations. There's a whole bunch of things that you can use. It's not just text and whatnot. You can start to use lots of different icon sets. So whether you want to use smiley faces or traffic lights or thumbs up or thumbs down, all of those kind of things that can visualize a KPI. Is this a good number? A number on its own is no good unless you can compare it to something. So am I going well against this number or am I going badly against it? We can use text as well. So we can start to sort of do like a heat diagram. So actually change the color of that shape based on the data behind it. We can use graduated bars as well. So give you some indication of, given on a scale of 1 to 10, how far through are we? And then we have things like speedometers and thermometers and stars and people and all of these kind of things. So it's it's really, really rich how you can start to put all of this stuff together. Okay, so the second one, or the second demo, is going to be how do I actually publish this stuff up. I'm just going to change the resolution in here because it's all gone a bit nasty for us. So bear with me, please. Yeah, I was hoping that I could just plug this thing in and everything's going to work beautifully with the resolution, but didn't have a time in the handover to get it all sorted. So, let's have a look. There we go. That's nicer. Okay. Right, so this is Visio. This is Visio 2010. I've got a pretty simple looking diagram here. It's a recruitment process, like so, actually. Okay. Now, some of the things inside the client is that the ribbon's gone everywhere, so you've probably seen a whole bunch of Office 2010 stuff. In 2007, only some of the applications actually had the ribbon, but the ribbon's gone through everything, and it's inside Visio now. So it means that it's contextual. Because this is a cross-functional flowchart template, we've got that particular set of functionality showing up in the ribbon here. So other cool things in here that I quite like is dragging all the stuff onto the page, and all my lines are all kind of wonky, and you must spend ages because I'm quite pedantic trying to get all my lines all sorted out. So what I can do here is just hit my auto align in space, and it makes everything all nice and square. It's quite nice, isn't it? Yeah, all good. So, in order to publish this up, so I'm going to go save and send, save it to SharePoint. Here's my options. So remember, the Visio drawing format is not going to render in the browser. So I choose my web drawing. It's going to the right place, and it's going to, it's just like saving a document up to SharePoint. So it's going to go and have a talk to SharePoint, to my TechEd site up there, and then my browser. Come on, fella, hurry up. Oh, by the way, while we're here, so this is Safari, and this is a Visio diagram sitting in the browser. So this is not Silverlight, this one, but it's a image, and so I can still zoom in okay. It's not quite as smooth as it would be with Silverlight, but it's still a pretty good experience, yeah? And all these guys actually look like criminals, don't they? Look at that guy there. Looks a bit like Steve Letford, actually. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to save it in there, and my little box over there, it says automatically view files in the browser, so as it saves it, it's going to open up a browser for me with this particular Visio diagram in there. As it does that, so I might just carry on because so we can get out of here a bit quicker, eh? But no, it's not. Come on. Here we go. Okay, there we go. So I can do my nice. Whoops, where are we? Where's he gone? There it is there. So that's my diagram in the browser. Pretty easy. I've got a little slidey thing up here. I can slide all the way in, slide the way out. Whoops, a bit too far. So in the browser, what it's also got is the ability to view the data, so the shape data. I click on this guy here, and as I click on here, it's showing me all of the data that's inside that particular shape, which is important because we'll look at that a bit later. So I might just get rid of these guys here. I don't want those anymore. Okay, so that's my diagram. That's cool. So I want to put some data with it. Now, what I created earlier is a SharePoint list. Pretty simple list. It's got a set of steps, and it's a HR recruitment. So my steps are application submission, interview, blah, blah, blah. The number of people who have applied for a job, the average turnaround time in days, and then the cost. So kind of the cost of my HR process. And my Visio diagram over here mirrors that. So you see we've got application submission, goes through, did they get through the first round, through the interview process, all of that kind of stuff. So I'm going to hook that SharePoint data up to Visio. So I come across to data, link data to shapes, and here's all the things that I can choose from. And remember, if I chose Excel workbook, if I want to publish it into SharePoint, it's got to be Excel services. It's got to be a Excel spreadsheet published into SharePoint. I'm going to choose a SharePoint list. Just so happens, here's my pre-populated thingy, and I'm going to use recruitment stats. So it's going to go away, it's going to pull that data down, put it inside, cache it inside here, and we can see it at the bottom. So we've got all my different steps. Now, in order for me to hook that data up to the shapes in my diagram, I could simply drag it up like that, and then we're seeing that data against that shape. Now, I could probably do that on this particular diagram because it's only a small number, but if you have loads and loads and loads of these shapes, you want to do it automatically. So I can come here, automatically link all shapes on this page. Now I've got to tell Visio which data field maps to what part of the data shape. So I've got step over here, which is my part of my data set, and I want to map that onto shape text. And then that's going to tell Visio that whenever they see a match, load that data into that particular shape. And I come through, yep, that's all good. Now, some of these things have been matched and some haven't. So I've got send thank you communication is actually no higher. So I could drag that on like so, and then down here, the last one is hired. So what I'll do is I'll change that to hired. Oops. Like that. And then I'll do that again. Yep. Okay, so it's really important that you get the text right on both sides, otherwise it's never going to match it. So if I save that, that'll end back up inside SharePoint. And then when I refresh, see if that's happened. Okay, so there we go. Now, that bar across the top will give me the ability to enable that data refresh just within that particular browser session. So if I close the browser down, it's not going to refresh it for me, or it's kind of trusted always. So, and it's individual to the user. So if I do it, enable the session, it goes away, and it's going to sit there in the background and refresh that data for me based on whatever we've done on the Visio services side. If I did it all, so if I do it just for the session, the next time I go there, it's going to ask me that again. But if I clicked always, I'll never see it again. Okay, so that's it. I mean, that's basically putting it into there. I've got some data, and then that's going to sit there and refresh, and the next time somebody goes in there, if the data's changed, they'll see something different. Okay, so that's pretty basic. I mean, that's not difficult at all. On the data visualization side of things, so if I come into here, and I've got different built-in data graphics. So this one here is a text with a bar across here. This one here has a speedometer. Now, changing these things is relatively simple. So I choose this one, click on Edit. So you basically, in here, you build up the information or the data in that shape that you want to display. So we've got the step name is displayed as text, the cost is displayed as a data bar, and the style is speedometer. We could change that to a people rating, we could change it to a star rating. And there's my upper and lower bounds. So if I change that to, let's say 1,000, then you'll see it's got 2 stars, but if it was bounded by, let's say 5,000, it's going to be half a star. So inside those things, you give it the upper and lower bounds around how it represents the data inside that shape, and it's going to expand or contract there. And then as I save these up, all of those data graphics that you can configure in the browser in the client are supported in the browser as well. Oh, there we go. Okay, so that's cool. Number 2, connections. So Visio Services gives you the Visio Services web part. So when you enable the enterprise features inside SharePoint, you get this Visio Services web part. And that allows you to drop it onto a page and view a diagram. So again, hammer it in. It only supports the Visio web drawing format. If you do the other one, it's never going to work. Inside there, you can set the diagram URL. So it's the link to the Visio file that you want to display. Over here, you can force it to use Silverlight. So if you don't have Silverlight deployed inside your business, you can force it down there. As well as you can override the auto refresh interval as well. And this guy here is important. So the shape data, so we saw that we have things like step name, and there was owner and function in that last one, so custom data that's coming out of a database. This here is really important, that you add those data elements out of your shapes in order for them to be used as data connections. So if I wanted to use the step name, so I think the last one was application submission, if I wanted to use that for a web part connection, if I didn't add it into here, I couldn't use it to send data to another web part to filter it or something like that. So you can, this is basically a string, so be careful around case and spaces, and we'll see this in the next demo. So basically, web part connections allow web parts to talk to each other, so you can have a whole series of web parts sitting on a page, and they can be used as filters. They can pass data from one to another, pass through parameters, and that's how you build up, pretty rich and interactive dashboards. So this example here is a process library on this side, and it's the Visio Web Access web part on this side. So this is it's a document library. So as I click through here, this over here refreshes with that particular process. So pretty simple to build an application that will show all of the different processes inside your business. You've got them sitting over here, click on it, is that the right one, is that the right one, is that the right one? And it's going to refresh. So that's a really simple example of putting two web parts together, connecting them and building an application. So under the hood, they're all JavaScript based. Out of the box, there are 5 of them. You can see them down here. So I can send shape data out, use it as a filter or a parameter. This one over here, I can send highlights in. So if I've got a list of, say, servers down one side and a big giant diagram of all my servers in my business, as I click through those different servers, it will highlight that server on that page. And there's a few more of here. So because they're all based on JavaScript, the page does a refresh every time you do a click. There's also a JavaScript API that sits underneath it. So if you wanted to build your own connection types, you can do that through the JavaScript API. Visio Services has these 5 ones out of the box. The one I'm going to concentrate on is the send shape data to. So take data out of my Visio diagram and use it to pass it across to other shapes or libraries. So that's where these guys here become important. I've got to add the shape data into my web part there. Okay, so let's head over here. Got to go up. Here we go. Cool. Okay, so I've got a pretty simple web part page here, and I'm going to load on a few a few web parts. So I'm going to edit it. I'm going to add the Visio web access first. Add that in here. Just going to pop it on. I'll choose my diagram that I want to display. And it's in shared documents, and it's the process improvement one. And I'm going to add one of these guys. Oops, name. So in here I can turn elements of the UI on or off, so what buttons I can show, very similar to other web parts, whether I show the zoom, whether I turn zoom off, all that kind of stuff, and then just the standard appearance ones, what does the thing look like, how big it is. So click OK on that guy, I've got a diagram, zooming in and out, great. So what I also have is a set of process documents that are associated with that particular process. So I'm going to add that in there. I'm going to tidy this up a little bit by changing the view, and I'll get rid of the border just to space sakes. So now I've got all my process documents with the step name in here, and then what I want to do is to send the shape data. So now when I click on a shape inside Visio, I want to filter the process documents. And I want to use name to filter name of step. So stop editing that. Okay, so as I click through here, I've got these two, assess technical feasibility. That's not what I expected. I'll try that again. So connection send, take data to. That's a shape name. Okay, so if this doesn't work, I'm going to give up and we'll carry on. Okay, so what's supposed to happen is that, let's come over here, what have I done wrong here? Is that as I click through here, that was name, wasn't it? Edit web part, name. Oh, the space. Well done, that man. That might have been David Glenn, actually. Thanks, mate. Okay, so I do have to redo that. See, I told you, spaces are incredibly important to get right, because if you don't get them right, it doesn't work. Right, let's stop editing that guy, and fingers crossed. Yeah, look at that. Okay, so what you can do here, you could have your quite complex process, your business process. You've got a whole set of documentation that is related to a specific step in that process. You can pretty simply hook up your process diagram with a process library, and then as I click on these things here, I can see exactly what templates I need to do that process. You could hook it up to wiki entries. There's a whole bunch of opportunity here to make your processes much more richer than they currently are. Okay, so limitation with web part connections is that you can only, in the browser, you can only do one connection between web parts. If you need to do multiple connections between web parts, you need to step into SharePoint Designer, which is what I'm going to do now. I'm really going to get myself in trouble and watch those spaces. So what I am going to do is to add a couple of more in here. I'm going to do function, and I'm going to do owner, because that will make sense in a minute. Okay, what I also have is a really simple form here that's got owner, function, and name on it. Now I'm going to embed a info path form inside my web part page here, and I'm going to pass the shape data from Visio into my info path form. Shouldn't I click that one? Just so you can see me hook up stuff inside SharePoint Designer. Okay, so forms, info path, add that guy. I'm going to use the form library that I've already set up, That's all good. Here's my form. I can't do any more connections into there because I can only do one at a time. So I come across to here. I have connections already. I might refresh that. Edit the file. It's going to load it up inside SharePoint Designer for me. Then I can do the additional connections between those two web parts. So it's bringing it down, doing stuff for me. Here we go. Okay, I right-click in here. I want to add a new connection, and I want to send shape data. So send it from my Visio to the InfoPath web form, and I'm going to hook up function to function, owner to owner, and the last one was step, which I'm pretty sure I did name. Okay, so finish there, save that, that goes up, come back over here, refresh that. Okay, so click to there. So I'm filtering my document library over here, and I'm passing the data from my shape into InfoPath. You think, well, why would you do that? It's InfoPath. The payload is XML. You can kick off a workflow based on this. So you're taking data out of a database, you're showing it against a process diagram, you're sending it out to InfoPath. You could do something like create a service request off this. You could do a request for a change to the process. You could kick off workflow that checks in documents, checks out documents, etc. So you can start to build really rich applications pretty simply with absolutely no code. Okay. I've got 15 minutes now, and I'm going to absolutely head through this really fast, okay? Okay, cool, all good. So, workflow. SharePoint 2010 allows you to visually represent workflow as it happens. So inside the workflow bit of a document, you click on your list item or your document item, you hit workflow, you can now visually see what's happening. You can also start the design process inside Visio, export it out, import it into SharePoint, into Workspace, into SharePoint Designer, and then actually do all of your hookups. So what this is good for is that if you have some idea of what this thing's going to look like, you use a workflow tool or workflow visualization tool like Visio, then you can pass it off to your SharePoint Designer. Look, I want this thing to look like this. I don't know how to do it inside SharePoint, but here's a representation of it. You import it, and then you hook up all the bits and pieces. The way it happens is that the first thing you do is you create it in Visio, you export it as a particular file type, so it's a VWI. You go into SharePoint Designer, you import it. It then turns it into a traditional workflow list, all of the steps that you're going to do, and then inside Designer, you actually have to hook up all the different bits and pieces to parameters and libraries and all that kind of stuff. You publish it, and down here, through here, add some more stuff, you publish it, it's all go. Easy stuff. So I'm going to do that now. Okay, cool, right. So here's my initial workflow. Now with it, when you choose a new SharePoint workflow diagram, on the shape side of things, you get all of the actions, conditions, etc. that are supported by SharePoint Designer. So how do I do this? So I've got a start. I might compare a data source. I might do something that I think everybody's been waiting for ages. Look up the manager of a user out of Active Directory. That was a personal win for me, that one. And then yeah, so I can log to history. I can do all this stuff. I can start to build up this workflow, hook them all together, and it ends up looking like this. Now I can also put some intelligent text around what those shapes are. So basically, this workflow says if the purchase order is within $500, so if it's over $500, look up the manager of the user that requested it, and then start that approval process. If that manager approves it, yes, update status to approved. If he or she doesn't, set it to decline and then stop. If it's under 500, just update it to auto approve. Now, as you build these things up, it's got a it's a design validator, I guess. So I've got a decision shape here. I've got a no, but no yes. So if I check the diagram for validity, you'll see this. You'll see this guy here doesn't have a connection label with yes. That one there. So if I say yep, check it again, that's all the other page. It's fine. So then I would export that out as a Visio workflow interchange file to here. And then I jump across into SharePoint over this side, and I head to workflows, and I import it through, and it ends up looking like that. Now I've already gone through and kind of put all the things together because it's kind of boring watching somebody do that. You know, if the current item amount is less than or equal to some random number, you know, you go through that. Now when you publish it, if I come back to here, so important, check that. Check show workflow visualization on page, because if you don't, it's not going to create the Visio services bits and pieces that you need. What you end up with, something I prepared earlier, are these guys here. So I've got 3 different workflows here. The first one, put in a purchase order request for flights for tech ed, $416. It's under the $500 threshold. It's going to get auto approved. Tech ed tickets, $1,000. So it's over that threshold. It means it's got to go through the approval by manager, and that got approved. My last one was a limo for the tech ed party. That's in progress. What they look like is an exact representation of that Visio diagram we saw previously, and you'll see what's actually happened. So here's the start. It went through this one, got a tick, went through here, got a tick, and it finished over that side. This one here, which was my tech ed tickets, which I saw was approved, again, oh, this one actually took a different path. So it got to is it over 500? Yes, it is. Looked up the manager, who's Chris Norrid. It went through a separate approval cycle, hit the approved by manager, it got approved, and it finished. It still keeps all of the audit history down here. So every event, just like you have in normal workflows, every event which occurs is still logged. And this guy here, we can see, well, what's happened with this one? Nothing, actually. It's gone through. It's over $500. Looked up the manager. It's Chris Norrid. He's probably going, Paul's on drugs. He wants a limo for tech ed party. So then I know where this thing is. You think, well, okay, that's kind of cool. It's really, really important when you hit really complicated workflows. So this one here is another purchase order workflow, which is, it's incredibly difficult to follow looking on this list. So if it equals Friday, then email somebody, then go and get a request. Now, if the request type is standard, then do some approval stuff. Otherwise, if it's not standard, do some more stuff, and then you sort of see this branching going on. So it would be much nicer if we could view that inside Visio. So I've already exported it. I'm going to import it now, and we'll just see what that looks like. It's a bit of a nightmare. So it will be useful from a BA perspective to be able to use this stuff to lay out quite a complex workflow, and then you're relying on the SharePoint designer person to kind of hook it up. But you're starting from the entire workflow, as opposed to trying to work out what all your else if statements are inside SharePoint Designer, which kind of gets a little bit difficult, to be honest. And then as you're viewing that, what's the status of my workflow? I can graphically see where we are all the way through. Okay. I said I'd get you out here early. So, 3 options. You can just use the Excel Web Services web part just to show something in the browser. So that's going to reduce the requirement to have Visio services installed on everyone's laptop and to have viewers, etc. I forgot I got stuff to give away too. Terrible. So the other one is that you can use web part connections. So you can start to put different types of web parts and different types of data on a web part page, have them all work together and create these rich interactive dashboards, which is kind of nice. So using form services or just simply having, here's my library of process documentation, I click on that step in the process, what documents do I use? Ensure that you're using the right stuff. And then finally, helping you out with workflow. So being able to start off inside Visio, map out all your workflow. You've got all the shapes that represent actions and conditions inside SharePoint, hook them all together, give it to your SharePoint person, and they can hook it all up, and you're away. Then you get to look at the stuff. So, 3 cool things. So that was quite quick, because I was about 10 minutes late starting, so I kind of condensed it down. So any questions? And if there's not, I'll ask some questions, and then we can give away. I've got two webcams and an ARC keyboard, which is quite pretty, actually. Okay, down here.
Now, at the start of the presentation, you were talking about prefixes, and one of them was the enterprise version of SharePoint server.
Yep.
Enable the service. So if you have the standard version, is there something that you can buy, like the Visio services on its own or something?
No, enterprise cal for each user is the way you do that. Each user. Yep. It's quite at the back. It's the 2010 client and SharePoint 2010. So, okay. So it's the Visio Standard. So the edition Visio Standard won't give you any of that. You can't do any of that stuff you saw with Visio Standard. The minimum is Visio Professional. That'll give you all the workflow stuff and the ability to push it up as a web drawing. The premium one gets more into heavy-duty workflow stuff. There's a whole bunch of stuff around Six Sigma and whatnot. Yeah. Was that a good question? Yeah. Yeah, we think so. What do you want? Keyboard or a webcam? Okay. Can we get that? Down here.
How much more performance overhead or how much more resources do you need to supply your SharePoint?
Yeah. That's sort of how long's a piece of string, I guess. Yeah. So yeah, good one. So I've got a HD 5000 or a VX 5000. Yeah, HD one. There you go, HD. So yeah.
I want an answer to a question.
Yeah, I'm going to give you an answer. So if you have a ton of Visio diagrams that are talking to databases an awful lot, like it's a big massive process repository, there's a lot of work going on. And then if you have your refresh cycles quite short, then it's going to use a lot of resources. But if you're just publishing up static Visio diagrams, it's no more than viewing a Word document. So it kind of depends on the usage. But you can put quite a big load on SharePoint if you wanted to. Yeah, I mean, if you really started to have a lot of diagrams going back to databases and a lot of people accessing those diagrams,
Presumably, though,
you're good.
stuff is about as resources as any other basic workflow. It's all a step that maybe
Yep.
someone to do something.
Yep.
Carry on.
That's right. Yeah, the workflow is not such a big idea, but that first supply chain diagram, there's a lot of shapes on there, so there's potentially a lot of data coming back to be refreshed. And if it's something which is like monitoring a process that might have quite a short refresh cycle, and a lot of people might be accessing it. So your cache age would be important there. So you don't want any time somebody goes there, it goes back and refreshes it, because you might be doing that several times a minute. And if it's okay to have that data to be on a cycle of 5 minutes, it's okay for it to be that stale, then try and make it as long as possible. Yeah. Okay, guy behind you. Oh yeah, sure thing. Okay, so every form inside SharePoint 2010 can be customized with info path. Yeah, so there's a little thing up in the ribbon that says customize form. So your new item form, your edit form, your display form, all of the forms inside your workflows. Yeah, I won't show you, but come and see me afterwards. Basically, it'll render out of the box ones, but you can go in and customize that, put your branding on it, do some other stuff, enrich it. Do you want a weekend? Cool. Yes, mate.
You go backwards and forwards between SharePoint Designer and Visio, doing the export and import, and still maintain all the values you set.
Absolutely. Yep. So as soon as you export a Visio workflow interchange document, you import it into SharePoint, and you associate it with a library or a list or something like that. You cannot change what library or list that is associated with. So inside that WMI file is essentially BEPL, it's a business process execution language kind of format thing. And so the answer is yes, you can, as long as you want. Yep. David. No, all it's doing is it's going out, getting the data, and it's showing it in some way on the palette. You can't add stuff together. Yeah, can't do that. Sorry.
Now, when you have a solution for the different data sources you can't support, you
Yep.
also have SQL reporting services there. Is there any workarounds? Because I would have thought that it would be quite useful to have some aggregated reporting stuff and then have some...
So with the custom data sources that I didn't have up there, yeah, so a custom data provider, you could do something around that. Yeah, but out of the box, no, you can't do that. And honestly, there's probably another whole session around the JavaScript API, which is quite rich, and there's probably another one around custom data sources. Yeah. Okay, I think we've got one over here. Yep, sure can. Yep. Last question, I think. Yeah, so that's actually a cool thing around Visio services is that with those swim lanes we saw on that diagram, you can actually promote the shape names and the swim lanes as managed metadata inside SharePoint. Yeah. So that feasibility study thing, you can promote that in as a step. So there is a template, which is a process repository template, which is set up for that kind of stuff, is promoting those things out of Visio into metadata. Okay, so thanks very much, everybody, and have a great Tech Fest. Now, I'm sorry I was a bit short and rushed, but